Hey guys, welcome back to Ripestories. In this video, a Karen refused to stop parking her Tesla in my driveway and ended up getting towed 3 times. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled Dump Truck Delivery. So 20 years ago now, I worked at a landscaping supply business driving a dump truck. I've been a software engineer for most of the time since, but at that time, well, let's just say mistakes were made and I spent a few years driving a truck. These were single axle trucks, 26,000 pound gross. We often overloaded them by about a ton. My scooter was on the edge of the area we often delivered to, and we occasionally took rock or mulch to the high school there. I arrived one day with probably 4 or 5 tons of topsoil. If I recall correctly, I had to drive around the school and find someone. I suspect I'd been instructed on where to meet people, and those people were not there. I asked after the name I had on the delivery ticket. It was written on there like I should know who they were, when I found out someone behind the school and was informed that it was a math or physics, I don't recall, but something STEM related teacher I was looking for. I think I asked that person if they could find the teacher for me. Eventually, I met the teacher and 3 or 4 students in front of the school. I did not know any of them. I might have still been 19 or 20 at the time, and I looked young. It was not rare to be forced to find people for a delivery, and everything was normal so far. I got out of the truck and was told that the dirt was to be dumped into a planter, and they'd been assembling with decorative blocks around the sign for the high school. It was out maybe 50 feet into the grass between the road and the parking lot in front of the school. I hesitated and might have managed to say, before being interrupted. I was going to say that the truck would leave marks in the grass, and the truck at 12,000 pounds empty was heavy enough that it would compress the dirt, and even though the grass would only be flattened, it would leave a trail anywhere the truck went, likely an inch or 2 deep that wouldn't go away anytime soon. The tracks would be conspicuous. I don't recall if I got more than 1 syllable out before I was interrupted with a condescending tone, initially from the teacher and then from 1 or 2 of the students. I tried to speak again, and again I was met with a mix of disbelief that I did not understand the instructions and further attempts to explain what they wanted me to do, as though I was 5 years old or did not even speak English. I believe I attempted to speak 2 or 3 times before giving up. I acquiesced, got back in the truck and proceeded to drive out into the grass, leaving ruts that the groundskeepers would regret for years to come. The grass will be cut off level above these ruts, but you will still feel them when you drive over them with a mower. I backed the truck up to one side of the planter and dumped dirt in it until it was piled above the small semi-oval retaining wall, and I was signaled to stop. The sign was in the middle of the planter, which meant that the pile was only on one side. The other side was pretty much just empty. I expected that we would want to drive to the other side of the planter. When you dump enough piles of something, you get a feel for what's gonna take it to fill a space. However, after being told to stop, I got out to suggest that they would want more dirt here to fill the entire planter. Again, I was not able to finish a sentence. I attempted to tell them that when they spread the dirt out in the planter, it was not gonna be anywhere near the brim. I also would have been willing to stay while they moved some dirt over to the bare area so we could dump more in without spilling out into the grass. It was clear that they had no use for anything I might have to say. The disrespect was clearly intentional. I'm not sure if there was some perceived slight or if this was just a wolf pack who did this to everyone. I was told to go dump the remaining soil. There was probably 2 or 3 tons left in the truck. It could have been put to good use in the planter still, out in a row crop field back behind the school. Here's another intricacy of working with a dump truck you might not intuit. Dirt does not spread out evenly on a dump bed. Most trucks have chains for the gate that allow you to meter how quickly the material comes out of the truck. These work great with small rocks and gravel. With material that's more prone to clumping, you set the chains such that the gate can open wider and be less prone to clogging, but for dirt and mulch, it effectively just does not work. It hits the gate, compacts a bit, and then is clogged. Then you cannot release the chains because there are thousands of pounds of material pressed against it. You have to dig it out, which is a lot of work, even with gravity helping, and of course the whole exercise was futile from the start. Thankfully, these people didn't know to ask, or I'm sure they would have directed me how to do my job, and then I would have been faced with either arguing with people who did not care what I thought, or setting the chains and then spending 10 minutes unclogging the gate of the truck. You might guess there's too much nuance in that to convey in a scenario where I've been yet to allowed to finish a sentence. We were not having a conversation here, and these people were enjoying this for some reason. This was a long time ago and I don't remember much of what was said to me, but I do clearly remember one kid slowly explaining, "Just take the truck over there and drive while you dump it out," or something to that effect, with hand gestures like you would explain something to a kid. By this point, I would not piss on them if they were on fire, so I was not inclined to expose myself to any more of this noise. I had them sign for the delivery and then drove around the school and into the field. I felt a little bad for whoever farmed this field, so I actually did try to make it work as well as possible. I also doubted that they had permission for this, so I drove about as fast as I was willing to drive in a recently tilled field and started raising the bed. As topsoil is wont to do, nothing happened until the entire mass started sliding and essentially landed in the field in a large pile. You could tell that if you knew what you were looking at, the truck had been moving when it was dumped, but it was still a pile that someone was gonna have to deal with. I drove past the school a week or so later on another delivery. I was curious to see if they had gone out to the field to get some of the nice sifted topsoil when they realized the planter was barely half filled, or to maybe use it to patch the ruts in the grass. There were still obvious tracks leading to the newly constructed planter. The planter was half filled with dirt, leaving the back of multiple courses of block exposed, and the large pile of dirt was still standing out in the field. The planter stayed that way for years. I don't know if anyone ever fixed it. The entire complex was apparently demolished and has been replaced with a new building now. I moved out of the area a long time ago. I'm not entirely certain that this was malicious compliance. I was not trying to be malicious, but I was not gonna argue with people who were being both insulting and borderline hostile. I held that job way too long, maybe 6 years, so I certainly had more bad or weird encounters with customers, like the time I guess I disappointed a couple trying to have a delivery man three-way, but this one was one of the worst. And the next one is the title story, which is titled, "Karen refuses to stop parking her Tesla in my driveway. I towed her 3 times." You would think that people would understand after something happens to them enough times that they shouldn't do it, but my neighbor Karen has been an extremely slow learner when it comes to some things in our neighborhood. We both belong to a homeowners association, HOA, and have a certain number of rules which we must abide by in the neighborhood, including respecting heights for fences, backyard noise, color schemes for the outside of our houses, and respecting everyone's properties. I got a large driveway on my property, but I also have a garage where I generally park my own car. The problem is that Karen often parks her Tesla in my driveway, and it can make getting out of my garage difficult. The first time it happened, I went and spoke to her about it. She told me that she would have extra company and that there hadn't been room in her yard to park. I told her that if she wanted to park in my driveway, that she could speak to me about it first. "I was in a hurry," said Karen. "I can understand that," I said, trying to be understanding, "but sometimes when I go to work in the morning and need to get out of my garage, I'm in a hurry too." Karen moved her car and I thought that would be the end of it, but it happened again the next week. Again, I spoke to her about it and she moved the car. I once again reiterated our previous conversation that if she were going to want to park in my driveway, that she should ask and that I might find her a spot that was not right by my garage to facilitate my life too. When it happened the third time, I told her that her actions were violating HOA guidelines and that I would have no choice but to report her if it happened again. And well, it did. This time Karen was not home when I wanted to get out of my garage. Apparently she had gone off with one of her visitors somewhere and left her Tesla parked in my driveway. So I sent a complaint to the HOA and I also had her car towed out of my yard. This seemed to have no effect on Karen other than her complaining to me that I'd made her more work because she had to go downtown to get it from the impound lot. "Maybe next time you will think before you park in my yard," I said. "We talked about this and you don't understand that my driveway is my private property. You have so much space. Why are you hoarding it?" "I bought my property that way," I replied. "If you need more parking at your place, maybe you should look to see if some of the lawn can be removed to make it happen." "And ruin my landscaping?" complained Karen. "Well, I don't know what other options there are," I replied. "But it's not parking in my yard because you don't respect my property." "Oh, come on," said Karen. "Surely you could just share." "Once in a while maybe," I replied. "But since you never asked first, it's a no." I ended up being late for work the other day and it was a major inconvenience for me to also have to find a tow company to come out here. "You did not need to have me towed," said Karen. "You just want to show that you're better than everyone." "That isn't it at all," I replied, but Karen had already walked off, clearly not understanding my side of things or seeming to care, but then Karen parked in my driveway again. This time I was done with niceties and trying to talk to her. She clearly did not respect me. I called the tow company and had them come and get her vehicle, even though I didn't need to go anywhere that day. One of my neighbors, Vivian, remarked on seeing the tow company in the yard. Yes, I said, I did not want to go that route, but Karen does not want to have a serious conversation about respecting my property. You aren't the only one who has had problems with Karen and her parking violations, said Vivian. It was someone down the street a few months ago, but when the HOA got too many complaints from that person, Karen parked in my yard a few times. However, my husband boxed her in a few times and that was the end of that. Now it seems she is taken to you. The HOA has plenty of evidence if you want to bring a bigger case against her, other than just a written complaint. We will see, I replied. I don't want to go to all that fuss, but something has to be done so that we can have peace on our own properties and not have to worry about whether we can access our own driveways. However, it happened again and I needed to get Karen's car towed again. Now, instead of just being annoyed at Karen's entitlement, I was actually angry that she was not learning from her mistakes. And given what Vivian had told me, it was going to just keep happening either with me or with someone else. And if I just allowed Karen to go off and park in someone else's yard, then it was not gonna solve anything. I decided that it was time to approach the HOA in person and see what could be done. Armed with evidence from the times that I had had Karen's car towed and everything that my neighbors provided me, we asked for a meeting and went together as a group. The HOA decided to send Karen a formal letter citing her behaviors and letting her know that if the issue continued, there would be a number of fines due to her non-compliance to HOA rules. "How could you do this to me?" asked Karen the next morning as I walked down the street to the community mailboxes. "Are you out to get me? All of this over my car? Wasn't it bad enough that you kept having me towed, costing me extra money? And now this!" Karen talked up a storm, not giving me time to answer any of her questions until she appeared to be out of breath. "Look, Karen," I said, "I don't want any trouble and neither do any of our other neighbors, but we all want to be respected and you think that all of your properties are something that you can use at your own will. That's not fair. You got a home with a driveway. If there's not enough room for you, it is up to you to figure out a solution. Taking spaces from your neighbors without having an agreement is trespassing and it's a nuisance for all of us." "You all hate me," said Karen. "You just want to force me out of the neighborhood." "No, that's not it," I said. "We just want you to respect our privacy. And we hate you? Never mind. How would you feel if we packed your driveway full of cars or something else? Let's say I decided to build a garden shed and filled your driveway with my building materials. Would that be okay with you?" "Of course not," said Karen. "Besides, your driveway and yard is much bigger than mine." "Well, that's not the point," I replied. "The point is that we are all deserving of our spaces and having you take over ours without our permission is not acceptable. No one has anything against you, Karen. Except me, but you need to let us live our lives." "I'm left out of everything," said Karen. "It is not right." "Well, maybe if you tried to be a better neighbor, people would enjoy having you around more," I said. "You're all just ganging up on me," said Karen. I shook my head and walked away. There was simply no reasoning with Karen. I felt bad for her. She seemed like she truly did not know how to properly function in society. I was not sure what was going to happen next, as she felt like the community was against her and did not understand that everything that happened was due to her own actions. Things seemed fine for the next week or so until Karen had company again. This time it was not her Tesla that was parked in my yard, but the cars of 3 couples visiting her home. I'd had enough. I contemplated what to do next. Did I call the city officials and get these vehicles towed again? I was hesitant because I knew that the fees would not be incurred by Karen, but by each of the vehicle owners who were likely not aware that they could not park in my yard without my express permission. I'd been at work when they parked in my yard and could not even access my own garage. I parked behind one of the vehicles and then walked over to Karen's place and knocked on her front door. "What are you doing here?" asked Karen. "I'm thinking you know the answer to that question," I said. "Why would you say that?" asked Karen. "Really? May I come in and we can address all the issues together?" "I'm actually having a dinner party right now," said Karen. "And that," I replied, "is exactly my issue." "You don't want me to have a dinner party?" said Karen. "It is none of my business who you dine with," I said, raising my voice in hopes that Karen's visitors would hear me from the interior of the house. "It is, however, my business when people park in my yard without my permission. I'm going to tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go home and go for a short drive to the cafe. I'm gonna get my favorite cup of coffee and cakes, and then I'm going to come home. When I return, I expect that there will be no vehicles in my yard and that I'll be able to park in my own garage. If I cannot do this, then I will have no solution but to call the tow truck and ask them to take away the 3 vehicles that don't belong here. A man came rushing out of the house. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," said the man. "Karen said you wouldn't mind if we parked there." "I might not have minded if you or Karen had thought to ask me," I replied. Unfortunately, Karen does not understand the meaning of private property. I did as I said and headed to the cafe down the street. When I returned, the vehicles were no longer in my yard. Actually, they were nowhere to be seen. It appeared that I might have embarrassed Karen in front of her visitors. And while it had not been my intention to have to go to such length, Karen had not given me any choice in the matter. I could not allow her to keep me from accessing my own property. And I knew if action was not taken, then she would think that she could continue to get away with everything. I forwarded a note to the HOA advising them of the situation and the outcome. I heard from Karen a few days later that she had received a fine from them and that her visitors had not even stayed for dinner. Karen accused me of ruining her entire celebration. However, Karen never parked her Tesla or any of her visitors' vehicles in my yard or any of my neighbors' yards again, and I call that a successful outcome. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Back when I was 17 years old, my parents decided to kick me out for a bunch of really dumb reasons, honestly. The biggest one being that I did not follow in their footsteps with their political beliefs. They hated that and how instead of just listening and obeying, I would question the things that they were saying. But the issues I had with them actually started before I even understood enough to get that opinion. My younger sister and brother were their golden children, and it was clear that they wanted a girl and liked her better. Why my brother got better treatment, I have no idea. I had chores while they had none and yet still ended up getting a bigger allowance. When I got a job, they tried to tell me that I had to split the money with them just because they were my siblings and we had to be fair. And when I refused, we got into this huge fight that ultimately ended with me being kicked out of the house. I don't know what lies they told the extended family, but it was probably me being a troubled child and a danger to everybody. I'll admit that due to the build-up stress from home, I was getting into fights at school and not seen as the greatest kid. Once I left, I felt like I could breathe for the first time and managed to start my way onto a career path in life. My grades plus low income meant college was off the table unless I wanted to pay huge amounts of money, so instead I went to trade school and learned how to be an electrician. I was good at it too, and with work and my own apartment and girlfriend, I was feeling stable and happy. Now jump to modern day and I'm 34 years old and I own an electrician company. It is small and just me, another guy and 2 apprentices. Still, being the boss feels great, and after years of hard work, I managed about 2 years ago to get a mortgage on my home for my wife and me. We had a small wedding and my family was not told about it since I have not spoken to them since I was 17 and they kicked me out. Suddenly, my parents found out where I live and showed up at my house out of the blue. They aged badly and I did not recognize them at first. They started to pretend like they missed me and how I'm doing so well for myself, talking about the house looking nice, and I could tell that it was all surface level fake and they must want something if they are crawling back to me. I was right. "Father, I can see you're doing well for yourself with this house. We wanted to give you some time to get a life together before we came back for our dues." Me, "Your dues?" "Mother, we raised you for 17 years. Food off our table, money out of our pockets. We are getting older now and need to recuperate our losses." Me, "Stop talking in riddles and just tell me what the hell you want." "Father, don't use that language in front of your mother." Me, "Last I checked, I did not have a mother or father." Mother, "Stop it. We need you to buy us a house. Or just give us this one since it seems to be pretty big anyway. After all, we are family and you need to take care of us." I really thought she was joking, but no, they wanted me to buy them a house. If you are like me, you might be wondering what the hell happened to their other house, and well, they gave it to my sister after she went to college and majored in art or something that she couldn't get a job with. As for my brother, he didn't even go to college and instead has been living and mooching off of my parents the entire time. I told them flat out that I was an electrician and I did not have a ton of money to just buy someone a house. On top of that, I was not gonna give them anything after the fact that they abandoned me when I was young for no good reason. Finally, I tried to explain to them that having kids means you are willing to give them food and shelter with no expectation of getting the money back from them when they grow up. It's called being a parent, and maybe if they were decent ones, I would have some sympathy or wanna help them. But oh man, it gets worse, because it turns out since they had some of my information, they ran a credit check on me and found that I had amazing credit. I did because I don't live outside of my means, and I was also blessed with having the luck of no emergencies that put me in the hole. My father explained to me and spoke down like I was 5 years old that good credit means I can just get a loan. They wanted me to get another house and use my good credit as leverage for another mortgage, therefore putting my current house up as collateral insurance. I exploded at them. Me, are you both really that dense that you think I would do a damn thing for you? You could have come here asking for $5 to save your life and I would tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. Go F yourselves and try to mooch off the 2 children that you managed to keep in your lives. I'm sure if either one of them opened their eyes for 2 seconds, they would also see that you are horrible people. My father tried to tell me off again for cursing, but I did not care, and instead unleashed a string of swears that would make a sailor proud. They left, but it was not the last that I heard from them or other family members. They shared my information and they managed to get so I was getting phone calls and texts from relatives and decided that if this is how they wanted to play, I was gonna get back at them. I found out the lies they told my aunts and uncles about running away or being violent at home. Instead, I told them exactly why I'd been kicked out of the house and why I don't want to help them after they did all of this to me. My extended family was not happy to hear this and turned on my parents, telling them it was wrong to try and force me to buy them a house and what they did to me in the past. The only ones that stayed on the side of my parents were my brother and sister, who honestly were probably just brainwashed at this point. I then blocked their numbers for the 4 of them, going no contact and truly keeping them out of my lives. I did meet up with my aunt and cousins, which was nice to at least have some of my old family back. I did not need my parents when I was 17 and I did not need them when I was 34 and getting my life on a good track. Last I heard, nobody was talking to them either anymore, so by harassing me they lost all of their family and know how it feels now. And of course, before we end the video, we will read a funny story from r/petty revenge. It is titled "Realtor parked in my spot, so I made sure that your buyer was dissuaded." For context, I lived in a condo where we all have assigned parking spots and there are several visitor spots sprinkled throughout. Well, one day I came home in the middle of a weekday, so the vast majority of parking spaces were empty, so I was very confused as to why a large unfamiliar SUV was in my spot. Now, we get the occasional visitor that mistakenly or purposefully parks in whatever spot they want. With this in mind, I parked right behind him and approached the window to ask him how long he was planning to be there. He said 45 minutes. I asked him if he could move to a visitor spot, there were some directly across from mine, but he said no in the rudest and shrillest voice I'd ever heard come out of a man. Then he started going off about how he is a realtor, he is showing this house, the door to which is directly in front of my spot, and the property management said to park here in this spot. I highly doubt that, and so on and on and on. I decided that I didn't have any time or energy for Karens that day, and in the middle of his ranting, I just said, okay then, and walked away to go park in a visitor spot. Rude people irritate me, especially if they are defending their crappy behavior, so I promptly took my revenge. My window faces the parking lot, so I set up my speaker on the windowsill and started blasting hardcore rap music for about half an hour, in the hopes that the buyer decided our quiet little community was not quiet enough for them. I figured the vast majority of my neighbors were at work anyway, so 30 minutes of loud music was not gonna annoy anyone too much. I hope I wasted a bunch of his time. Maybe don't be rude to complete strangers. To those asking why I didn't get him towed, well, I had tried in the past for other offenders. However, the HOA had not contracted with any specific companies, and the companies I had called would not touch any cars on a private multi-family property that they were not assigned to. And yeah guys, please check out my endless playlist on the left side, and I will see you again soon.